Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 1079 Rigid and Unforgiving. Chapter 1079 Rigid and Unforgiving. Spirit Core, 5 out of 100. Michael was completely flabbergasted as he felt a cool sensation enter into his core. If he focused on the spot where his heart would be, he now felt distinct motes of light swirling around like goldfish dropped into a calm pond. Those were spirits. You have spirits already? You haven't even done anything, Alaric complained. Even though Alaric was completely rooting for Michael and the Reborn company, he couldn't help but voice out the injustice of the world. Why was it that he needed to plan out things months in advance in order to earn a measly amount of points, while Michael gained them by absolutely doing nothing? I have no idea either, Michael replied. Why would the world give me 5 spirits? Alaric crossed his arms. Whatever it is, meant that you did something that your diva would approve of. That's just what things are like for those loved by the world, I guess. Ugh. Michael was surprised. I thought I'd have to use my nascent armor or my ability powers to gain spirits. That's a common misconception, Alaric said, shaking his head. The nascent spirit realm is different from the body formation realm. You can advance through the stages without using your powers even a single time. This was a very interesting turn of events. Perhaps Michael wouldn't have that much trouble gaining spirits. He never really was that fond of using his powers and fighting others. He only did that because it was necessary. But if he could do it without fighting, he'd absolutely preferred that. But if I were to do this again, I'll need to know how I did it. ChatJK6. Any idea what happened? The specific had not yet been identified. Please gather more information to narrow down possible answers. So you do have some idea, right? Yes. Nope. ChatJK6 had become really sassy after her update. Where did she get her dry humor from? Either way, she was right. There were way too many things that could have caused him to earn spirits. His best guess was that simply learning this information from Alaric somehow triggered that reward. That was the only thing he did, after all. I'll have to be more deliberate with my actions. Alaric soon left, stating some kind of curse to the heavens, leaving Michael alone to ponder about his next moves. First things first, he had to go and see the draconian called Vought. His reputation as a strict man didn't leave him with much hope, but he still had to try. So, he teleported back into the nation of Reborn, finding himself in the company of his most trusted officers. Welcome back. Yuna greeted him. I figured out the loophole. She beamed with pride and began explaining the contract laid out on the table. Basically, the upper echelons have made a tight seal on their fellow companies. There was absolutely no way that anyone could enter into the feast without the express and unanimous approval of every single company. So even if Reborn had allies, just a single company rejecting their approval would lock them out from the festival altogether. They used all their collective resources to make sure of this, Yuna said, clicking her tongue. But they're unlucky. If there is anyone that won't bow down to their immense wealth, then it's the draconians. Vought Steele, the draconian in charge of this festival. He could invite whoever he wanted, regardless of what the upper echelons told him. Yuna then told him about the other things she had planned for the loophole. After all, the upper echelons also planned for an event where Reborn was able to enter into the festival. In that instance, Reborn would also become eligible to inherit Tristar's territories. But thankfully, Yuna also had a counterattack for that instance. She explained it to him, but even he couldn't understand it. There were a lot of terminologies and ideas that only a Montgomery would understand. He would just have to leave it up to her. Michael and Yuna journeyed through to the core of New Sparta, into the territory of the draconians. They were now on their way to find Vought, hoping to convince the guy to let them in the feast. They both entered into a field full of spires, with distant roars echoing through the skies. Now that he was in the nascent spirit realm, he only now truly understood how powerful the draconians were. He could feel their dominant energy in the air. His nascent armor was feeling threatened. It was the same way with how Alaric immediately knew that Alpha was not in the body formation realm. Was this the reason why draconians were so feared? Were they all equivalent to the nascent spirit realm? Each of those spires emanated a kind of danger and energy that was undoubtedly much stronger than his own. Given that he was still in the first stage, these draconians were still all stronger than he was. No wonder the conglomerates and the upper echelon couldn't make them bend to their will. Are their scales the same as the nascent armor? Either way, he didn't have to worry too much. Vought was infamous for being a stickler for the rules, so he didn't have to worry about being attacked. Eventually, they were able to find a rectangular tower in the distance. It was rigid, unforgiving even in the assault of the winds. Michael and Una walked to its base, seeing the gray metal slate barring them from inside. "Excuse me," Michael called out. "I'm here to speak with Mr. Vought. We sent a letter recently." Before this, Michael sent them a letter detailing his wish of joining the feast. So they knew he was coming and why. Suddenly, a red portal swirled into existence in front of them. A black-haired servant appeared, looking at Michael and Una with a bland and uninterested expression. "We do not negotiate with anybody," he said. "Please do not visit us again. We are currently busy with our worship for her." Worship? Chapter 1080 Austere Vought. Chapter 1080 Austere Vought. Michael stopped and looked at the servant in front of him. His eyes looked crazy. The kind of crazy that he had seen before. "No, there's no way, right? Worship for her?" he asked the attendant. The attendant's eyes glowed with great reverence as soon as he heard Michael mention their magnificent goddess. "Yes, that is right, human. You should very well know which goddess has descended upon these lands in the past couple of days. You must have seen her sign. It was the giant starry explosion that colored the night and day." Michael wanted to think that his first idea was wrong. But the more he was finding out about this supposed goddess, the more his intuition seemed to be proven correct. "Who is this goddess?" Michael asked. "There is no one other than the Iron Maiden," said the servant with fervent reverence. For a second there, Michael saw the distinct shadow of a devilish slime move past the man's eyes. That slime, clearing his throat, Michael stepped forward. "I would like to know more about this Iron Maiden," he said. "Can we come in?" The attendant, who seemed to be very standoffish at first, now looked at Michael and Una with warmth as soon as he found out they wanted to worship the goddess. "Very well. As the superior species, we draconians must make sure that all of you humans are well informed of the true goddess of this universe. Come inside," he said as he turned around and entered back into the red portal. Michael and Una both shared a look before they eventually followed the attendant inside. As soon as they stepped in, they were immediately greeted with a grim and dark setting, one with a very rigid structure and a distinct lack of color. Michael would even think that this would be a perfect place to put criminals in so that they could repent and change. Prison, in short. Draconians walked left and right with perfect, ramrod-straight posture, as if they were army soldiers marching through to battle. Their skin showed slight hue shifts as scales sporadically showed on their bodies like pigmentation. And now that Michael was much closer to them than before, he could definitely tell that their scales had a very special property that allowed them to exhibit the same strength as a nascent spirit cultivator. "Your hypothesis seems to be correct. Their scales are not made out of normal physical material," ChatJK6 commented. "But their normal skin is the same as any human and their physical strength bar their own scales are not worthy to be categorized in the nascent spirit realm. In short, they might have scales that protected them from any physical harm. But if you were able to bypass that, then they were very weak and vulnerable. This was very good to know if he ever got into a scuffle against draconians. Of course, he wasn't planning on doing so. And thankfully, it looked like the draconians here weren't hostile to him either. Most of them even bowed towards him and Una with a perfect 90-degree bow. The fact that he was being escorted by the main servant of their leader gave them a lot of street cred in this draconian tower's pocket dimension. They continued on walking through the halls of this unadorned tower, until eventually, they had some color. On a wall to their left, he saw a depiction of black starry skies that were filled with a very accurate painting of the starry explosion phenomenon a few days back. Below that, he saw the silhouette of many men, women, and draconians looking up at the night omen with awe and wonder. Then as they moved to the next wall, they saw a continuation, where a new figure emerged out of the shadows, with his blob and amorphous body casting a light onto the clueless draconians below. This seemed to symbolize their enlightenment onto the truth of the goddess as told by this drawing. "I see you've seen our mural," the attendant said. "Yes," Michael replied. "Who's that slime thing over there?" "Oh, our reverend prophet? He is our leader. He was the one who told us about what we were truly missing from our world. Through his words and guidance, we became part of the Iron Maiden religion." The attendant's description painted some kind of priest or hero saving them from salvation. But Michael knew the truth. They were being led by a mischievous slime who was doing all of this out of pure naughtiness. "And where is this reverent prophet now? So that I can scold him." "He is currently." But just as the attendant was about to say something, The door opened in front of them, showing them the inside of a bare-bones throne room, with only a simple wooden chair in the middle. A draconian sat in this austere throne, black, curving horn above his head, looking down towards a human man wearing opulent royal jewelry. Michael guessed the horned man to be Vought, and the completely out-of-place man to be his guest. They seemed to be in the middle of a very serious discussion, which was why the attendant stopped talking. He silently gestured for Michael and Una to come into the throne room, but to keep quiet while doing so. "I shall introduce you to Lord Vought once they are done with their discussions," the attendant whispered. Michael had no problem with that. He wanted to snoop in on their conversation after all. There was something about Vaught's guest that made Michael immediately suspicious. The man wore an extremely expensive blend of silk and linen. Not only that, but the man was a magnetic as well, and not a weak one either. Unknown guest. 9th stage body formation. Ability power. Negotiation tactics. He has the power to bend words and meaning so that he would gain the upper hand in any conversation. A 9th stage non-combat magnetic. He could already tell that this man came from a big background. An upper echelon. Only they had the resources to invest in a non-combat magnetic of this caliber. "As I said, Lord Vought, it is imperative for you to please heed our request. We have no doubt that the Reborn company will try to ask for your permission inside the feast. If you turn them back to where they came from, we shall be willing to give you a few treasures that would suit a draconian's taste." Vought looked down at his guest with a nonchalant gaze. He didn't seem mad nor interested in dealing with him. "You think I am a man who bends the rules?" Vought asked, his voice cool and dark. The man shivered. Immediately, he knew that he had done something wrong. No, Lord Vought. We simply believe that the Reborn company will try and persuade you. And you think I am to be persuaded? No, surely not, Lord Vought. We are simply expressing our approval of your stringent rules with a gift. If I am going to turn away someone to follow the rules, I am doing it to honor my own code. Not because a human company told me so. 9/11. Yes, Lord Vought. A few seconds of awkward silence radiated throughout the room, making everyone feel a slight breeze. But I am in a forgiving mood. I have recently been told that my code is not up to the standards of my goddess. Immediately, the upper echelon man raised his head to Vought. His eyes widened. He knew that this was an opportunity. "Ah, the great Iron Woman. No, Maiden. Iron Maiden. Yes. She is a magnificent goddess," the man said, immediately fawning over to Vought. "So you know of her?" Vought said, his face lightening. Good. We need more believers of the Iron Maiden." "Yes, and we shall be the Iron Maiden's greatest supporters, as long as you reject Reborn's requests." Vought stayed silent for a few seconds, before he raised his head and finally noticed his new guests. The attendant immediately walked over and kneeled at his lord. "Lord Vought, I have come with visitors. They hail from a human company called Reborn." The upper echelon man immediately swiveled his head towards them, his eyes widening with shock. "Ah yes, we were just talking about you," said Vought. "Yes," the man nodded. "They are exactly the lawless men and women that dare disrupt the code and honor of the Iron Woman goddess." Michael looked at the upper echelon man and studied him carefully. On his chest, there was an emblem of a falcata sword over a shield. The name Falconry Guards was etched under it. Falconry Guards. Rank 29th in the golden rankings, ChatJK6 said. Michael seemed to remember this exact company giving them gifts and expressing their wish for an alliance just a few days ago. But it seemed that they were actually part of the anti-automobile group started by the TriStar company. He made note of that. Chapter 1081 Hearing Things. Chapter 1081 Hearing Things. Vought looked at Michael with a careful eye. His eyes widened, noticing something peculiar about him. "You say you are from Reborn? I have heard many things about your company," he said, a slight curve on his mouth. "Those mechanical monsters they call automobiles are interesting." The Falconry Guard's representative immediately interjected. "But you have no need for that, Lord Vought. In fact, it is entirely useless to all draconians, for it is much more honorable and grand for you to fly using your own God-given gifts, correct?" The dark draconian man nodded. "Yes, in fact, I find it a nuisance sometimes as the noise of those loud and booming vehicles cloud my mind." A smile appeared on the upper echelon man, but soon disappeared as Lord Vought continued. "However, I cannot deny its use to the general mass. The fact that they can be used so that even normal citizens can traverse large distances is something I am sure that the Iron Maiden will appreciate." "You say that you have come here to ask permission to operate in the festival." Michael stepped forward. "That is right." "Then state your case," Lord Vought said. "Why would I let you do such a thing, when the rules and regulations clearly state otherwise?" Una immediately stepped forward with a copy of the sumptuous draconian feast festival rulebook that Vought specifically wrote himself. According to Section 5 Article 26, no human company will be allowed to participate in the feast as a seller of any kind. Only those in the upper echelon and the conglomerates have those full rights inside the venue, she mentioned with a clear and straight voice. Exactly, replied Vought. See? It clearly states that Reborn cannot participate. The upper echelon man's words were stopped by a quick glance by Vought. That silent stare of his was enough of a warning for him to not interrupt in his conversation with Yuna. If we were to interpret this as literally as possible, then it is true that Reborn cannot participate in the feast. However, what if we are not participating? What if we are a guest of the draconians instead? What? The upper echelon man shouted. Yuna ignored him. Clearly, guests and sellers are two different titles. After all, even the other beast folks will be allowed to operate inside the feast as a guest of the draconians, even though it is stated explicitly that only human companies are allowed to do so. As soon as she mentioned that, the Falconry man's eyes went wide. And that's not all. In Article 10 subsection 27, Yuna continued to list out all of the inconsistencies and loopholes that she was able to see in the rulebooks. Everyone in the room was absolutely awed at Yuna's ability as an arbiter. After all, these rules and regulations were submitted by the upper echelons before they were approved by Vought himself. But even then, she was able to spot a silver lining throughout all the bureaucracies and the red tape that the upper echelon made to stop Reborn from participating. So, as long as Lord Vought considers us as his guest, then we are able to operate on the feast even if we are not from the upper echelon. Yuna finished her long explanation with a proud smile and a cheeky snort at the upper echelon man. But that's breaking the rules. He tried to argue. Yuna shook her head and wagged her finger. We're following the rules exactly. Everyone knows that in a contract, those who do not specify their words will always end up at a disadvantage. If you do not specify, then you cannot defend it in a court of law. That was the reason why the rulebooks were hundreds of pages long. Each subsection were more detailed specifications of the rules to make sure everything was tightly sealed. Alas, they seemed to have forgotten why Yuna was being touted as Zir's successor. Vought smiled at Yuna and Michael. That is correct. Those are the rules, and the rules do not prohibit the Reborn company from entering into the feast as my guest. The Falconry man panicked. Lord Vought, we will give you 100 million sand as a gift if you reject the proposals of these heathens. But Lord Vought seemed much more curious and interested in Michael and Yuna rather than entertain the upper echelon man. He could see that the draconian was teetering on the edge of letting them into the festival. That can't happen. Now that the Reborn company knows about their true allegiance, they can't let them succeed. They already saw what happened with the TriStar company. They didn't want that to happen to them. And in a last-ditch effort, the man thought of a devious plan. Arg! The man screamed, holding his head in pain. A voice? He muttered, looking up at the empty walls of the throne room. A woman? Who is that? Is that you, Iron Woman? Maiden? Lord Vought straightened in his seat. The Iron Maiden? Can you feel her presence? Michael almost rolled his eyes. I too heard her voice a few days before. She is one convincing goddess, is she not? Yes. I hear you, Iron Maiden. It seems that you do not want the Reborn company to be included into the feast, right? I hear you loud and clear. Vought leaned in, looking concerned at the words he was being fed. Is that what she says? Truly, replied the man. Michael saw ability power threads spooling out of the man's heart and into his throat, empowering his voice to be as genuine as it could be. Can you? Michael asked, his doubt echoing in the walls. You dare doubt the Iron Lady? Accused the upper echelon man. Lord Vought, I suggest you banish these non-believers out before we earn the ire of the metal goddess. But just as he said that, a dark shadow suddenly enveloped the already grimdark throne room. Chapter 1082 Prophet Fudge. Chapter 1082 Prophet Fudge. Lord Vaught's face immediately turned from a stern countenance into one with great fervor and worship. His eyes glazed with the same craziness as those who had been caught up in the feverish ideology spread by that mischievous slime. Has someone mentioned the Iron Maiden? A childish voice bellowed from the darkness. Prophet, Lord Vought said, getting up from his seat and bowing to the darkness on the corner. The upper echelon man turned his head just in time as he heard a rapping on the ground like a ball bouncing consecutively. Then he appeared, a violet slime garbed in an all-black attire, a stylish cape that fluttered even when there was no wind, and a metal headband with a copyrighted symbol etched onto its surface. Huh! He couldn't help but mutter out his confusion as soon as he saw who this prophet turned out to be. From all the embellishments and laudations that were being thrown when discussing him, the man would have thought that the prophet was a heroic figure with a charismatic stature befitting of his title. At the very least, he thought they were a humanoid figure. A demi-human or a beastfolk would have been more believable. But a monster? And not just any monster, a slime. A low-ranking monster like that shouldn't even be able to speak. Prophet, we have just witnessed a hearing, reported Lord Vought. This man has been blessed with the voice of the Iron Maiden. Fudge hopped over to the Falconry representative. Each hop was accompanied by a squishy boing-boing sound, which completely undermined the mysterious and intimidating presence that he was trying to cultivate. Is that so? You've heard her voice? Fudge asked the man. The representative started to sweat. Ah, yes. Loud and clear. Ability power threads insidiously snaked out of his chest and over towards Fudge, attempting to use his powers of negotiation to make him believe his words. But as soon as it touched Fudge's squishy, violet body, the man felt a cold, jarring sensation crash back at him at a surprising velocity. His world started to turn, with ghostly and demonic apparitions appearing out of nowhere to spook his heart into shock. The man staggered back, his pace turning pale and gaunt. A magnetic? Fudge snorted. You talked to her? Ah, weird. It just so happened that I was talking to her just a few moments ago. Objection. Her line was busy, Your Honor. No, it's... The man stammered. You lied, Lord Vought said, his voice sending chills and shivers to the lying man. Please forgive me, Lord Vought. I was simply... The strict draconian raised his hand. Begone, he said, and suddenly, a power surpassing even that of the nascent spirit realm emanated out of Lord Vought, throwing the upper echelon man out of the throne room and out of the draconian tower altogether. Then, Lord Vought gestured for his main attendant to come forward. Destroy the falconry guards, he commanded the attendant. Yes, my lord. Then, the attendant turned back and exited the throne room, gesturing for the other attendants to come follow him as he did so. Ready the wyverns. We ride at this moment, he said to them. The entire draconian tower immediately went into a controlled state of activity. Michael could feel hundreds, if not thousands, of draconian light mana signatures gathering into rigid army structures all over the tower. Wyverns circled the skies, their flapping wings creating tremendously large gusts of air that blew away boulders nearing the tower. And not even a few minutes later after Lord Vought sent his command, an entire army of draconians soared into the skies and disappeared into the horizon. At the same time that this was happening, Michael looked at the black-haired draconian with complete and utter shock. Just like that? They were going to destroy an upper echelon company just like that? And the falconry guards weren't even in the lower part of the upper echelons. They were ranked 29th. He couldn't believe that Lord Vought would so offhandedly declare war with one of the strongest companies in the entire world. And with his confidence, it even looked like he was purely expecting them to win. If this was true, then no wonder the draconians were so feared even amongst the conglomerates and the upper echelons. If each of their strongest draconians were as powerful as Vought, then they definitely had a right to be called as the strongest species in the world. I apologize for that, Lord Vought said to Michael and Una. They deserve the highest and most brutal punishment for besmirching the name of the Iron Maiden like that. Good boy, Vought, Fudge said, jumping atop the austere draconian's head. Michael winced after seeing that. What was Fudge doing? Didn't he just see that guy order his army to destroy an upper echelon company with absolutely no hesitation? He was treating Vought like his own personal attack dog. He was going to get himself killed. Arf, arf, Vought said as he kneeled towards Fudge. Michael froze. What? Fudge leaned in towards Michael and winked. Michael almost collapsed to the ground. Miss Una, Fudge said, hopping over to Una's head. I missed you. Aw, Fudge. I've missed you too. But what are you doing with Lord Vought? That's not a nice thing to do. Fudge put his blobby hands behind his back and swayed back and forth like a guilty kid. Then, he even put on one of his most impressive puppy dog faces that would make even the hardest stone turn into a puddle. I can't stay mad at you, she said, pinching Fudge. No, Una. Don't fall for that devious slime's tricks. Michael wanted to say that out loud, but he was far too shocked to speak. Prophet. Do you know these people? Vought asked. Yes. They're my masters. So they're your masters too. Chapter 1083 Vaught's Advice. Chapter 1083 Vaught's Advice. Lord Vought turned to Michael and Una, giving them obeisance by kneeling on both of his knees. Forgive me. It seems that my connection to the Iron Maiden is still but a tenuous one. I should have known your holy presence from the very start. Michael internally shook his head. He could never understand how Fudge could manipulate people like this so easily. Lord Vought wasn't just some guy, he was a draconian. And not just any draconian, but someone who had enough strength and confidence to declare war upon an upper echelon company without batting an eye. Just that brief show of power was enough for Michael to know that Lord Vought was definitely high up in the nascent spirit realm. maybe even beyond it. Fudge's tricks shouldn't have worked on a man with this caliber of power. I am honored to be in the presence of the Chosen One, said Lord Vought. Looking at your holiness now, I can definitely see the power of the Iron Maiden resting on your stature. No, no, Michael began to refute, but Fudge interrupted him. That's right, the mischievous slime said. He was the one who brought the Iron Maiden from the depths of hell and allowed her to recover to her state that she is today. And in the future, he will be the one to bring her into this world. Lord Vought bowed even deeper as he heard that. I do not dare presume the kind of power and strength one needs to accomplish such a task. But if you are ever in need of my help, then I shall do my best to fulfill it. I seem to recall the Reborn company wanting my invite onto the feast. Consider it done. It's the very least that I could do. Michael slapped his own forehead at this whole whimsical situation. Was this real? Did they really just gain an extremely powerful draconian ally because of Fudge's antics? And as much as he wanted to refute Fudge's words, it did hold some truth. He was going to resurrect the Iron Maiden. He seemed to be intertwined with her even if he wanted to or not. She was the one who started his magnetic journey in the first place, and also helped him transcend to the nascent spirit stage just a few days ago. He had a feeling that him continuing on his cultivation journey would eventually make him cross paths with the Iron Maiden. Isn't it against the rules? Is that really okay? He asked Vought. As she said earlier, your arguments were all rooted in the rules. Some people think that rules are things that are rigid and cannot be bent whatsoever. But the truth is that they are a pliable material. It can be molded into different shapes and it will still be considered as following the rules. As long as the essence of the rule is preserved, then one can do as one wishes. Michael felt the confidence oozing out of Lord Vought. The draconian in front of him was very assured of himself, which makes him a very charismatic person. No wonder those attendants of his went to war just through his one command. With such leeway, Lord Vought continued, there are no excuses for those who break the rules. And the rules of the Iron Maiden stand above all. Anyone who opposes her will can be considered treasonous. And you're going to wage war because of that? Michael asked. Yes, the rules propels me to do so. Hee. Destroy all those naysayers who don't believe in the Iron Maiden, Fudge said. For some reason, all the cool, stylish, and charismatic points that Lord Vought had were quickly negated by the talking slime above his head. Michael simply couldn't take the guy seriously with Fudge making those mischievous smiles right in between Vaught's curving horns. Prophet. Does this mean that the Reborn Company is the secret organization helping the Iron Maiden religion prosper behind the scenes? Fudge nodded. Yup. Now that you know the secret, you are held liable by a binding contract with the Iron Maiden. You must help the Reborn Company whenever we are in need of help. Forever. Lord Vought didn't bat an eye with that promise. Very well. I shall take this secret to my grave and uphold this responsibility. Hear that, Master? We got a new pet, whispered Fudge to Michael. Michael ignored him, of course. It was nice to know that they could rely on an ultra-powerful draconian if it came down to it, but he wouldn't be using his help for things that would upset the balance too much. He'd basically be giving Fudge approval to influence more and more powerful people. That can't happen. So he would just ask for Vaught's help if he really needed it. I should have known that only the blessed of the Iron Maiden would create such a magnificent creature such as the automobile, Lord Vought said to Michael. I thought you thought of them as a nuisance. The dark draconian nodded. Yes, I may find mosquitoes as a pest, but I wouldn't want to wish them extinction. They are part of the natural world and were made by the goddess with its own purpose. Fudge bounced up and down on Vaught's head. Automobiles are the creatures of the Iron Maiden, he said. We've made a lot of progress in integrating the Iron Maiden into New Sparta thanks to those cars. The more they are dependent on it, the easier it will be to convince them that automobiles are the Iron Maiden's blessed creatures. It seemed that Michael had no one else to blame but himself. He was the one who pushed for the integration of automobiles into New Sparta. It completely crossed his mind that the believers of the Iron Maiden treated automobiles as their sacred creatures. Therefore, empowering cars would only empower the Iron Maiden. And as he saw from the mural in the entrance of the tower, Vought and the rest of the draconians were only enlightened about the Iron Maiden because of the starry explosion phenomenon that occurred because of him. In short, he was the one who did this. Sigh. Blessed Michael, said Vought. At first, I wondered why the Reborn Company would try to enter into the feast, thinking that your company is far too recent to be able to contend with the conglomerates. But now that I know the truth, I understand that this is something that the Iron Maiden has asked you. Unfortunately, in this feast, my help to you will only be extremely limited. I am not famed for my business acumen. So unless you need someone to ride at dawn and overcome a war, I will not be able to help you. Michael fully understood that. This battle against the conglomerates won't be decided using strength. It would be decided through wits, skill, and business acumen. Those who conquer the market will become the ultimate winner. I have but a few things to tell you. First, you should not underestimate your opponents. The conglomerates are powerful on their own accord. They are self-sustaining. They have everything and everyone at their disposal. Conglomerates had the biggest pockets in this world. Their resources were nigh infinite. They were the only ones who could afford to lose billions of sand dollars without even batting a single eye. Not only that, but their reputation was literally world-class. They wouldn't have become a conglomerate if they hadn't conquered the market overseas. And since part of the customers inside this feast would be beast folks, the conglomerates already had a sizable advantage against all the others. They knew the products that would cater well to the mermen, the vampires, werewolves, etc. And the upper echelons weren't slouches either. They might not have as much of a wider range than the conglomerates, but they did have their own specialties. These companies reached this level only because they had become the very best in their specific niche of the market. If the conglomerates were a tsunami that destroyed everything and anything in its path, then the upper echelons were a spear of solidified water. They could pierce through the market with their depth. These were the kinds of opponents he'd face against in the feast. Of course, Reborn had their own specialties. At this moment, the upper echelons and the conglomerates already consider Reborn's specialty to be transportation. The automobiles would be enough for the Reborn company to enter into the upper echelon, given enough time. But his opponents were smart. They made sure to fight Reborn in a market that they weren't known for. So, if they blindly entered into the feast with their products, they'd get washed by all the other upper echelons. I hope you take these warnings into heart, Lord Vought said. Michael nodded, thanking him for his insightful words. But worry not. As a draconian, I still have some sway in the general public. Of course, it's not as large of a following as that woman, but it will give you a good start. Chapter 1084 Cherries. Chapter 1084 Cherries. Her? Michael asked. Lord Vought scoffed as he recalled the woman in his thoughts. Cherries. She's a draconian whose appetite made her famous, and not in a good way. Cherries? Like Charybdis? Just from her name alone. Michael already had an image of a monstrous worm that swallowed everything in its path. Because of her famous appetite, she has made herself a famous figure amongst beast folks and everyone else alike. Despite being hungry for what seemed like forever, she is quite a picky eater. She won't eat just anything that is edible. She has a distinct taste that is hard to pin down. There are stories of her destroying an entire continent simply just because there was nothing tasty in that country. So she ate the land instead. But when she does find something she likes, one can be assured that it is a food worthy for even the gods to eat. That is why many people like to follow her exploits and adventures. They want to eat what she wants to eat. Lord Vought continued to tell Michael stories about this infamous Cherries figure. And as it turned out, she was a draconian just like him, which made sense since their kind were famous for their hoarding tendencies. There are multiple no-name companies who have risen to stardom because they were able to satiate Cherries' appetite. The Hungry Elephants Company, the Pyramidic Cuisine, etc. Michael was surprised. The Pyramidic Cuisine got famous because Cherries visited their restaurant once and didn't destroy it into pieces? That was some interesting lore that Bo never told him. I'm only telling you this because Cherries will show up in the feast. And a lot of companies are actually strategizing their plans in the hopes of attracting Cherries to their store. If she liked the food there, then people from all over the place would surge at that location and tip the scales of the feast in their favor. Anyone who is able to accomplish that will basically be the winner of the feast. It was a good plan. Basically, some companies were treating Cherries as the winning lottery number. Even if they had a weaker sales number throughout the feast, as long as they got Cherries' attention even once, they'd be able to shoot up the rankings in one fell swoop. Michael had half a mind to do that as well. But this was also a high-risk, high-reward gambit. If she liked the product, then it's all good. But if she hated it, then the best-case scenario was that they'd lose a lot of customers. Worst case, their company would get reduced to cinders and ashes. She was supposed to be the one arranging everything in this feast, Lord Vought said, crossing his arms. But typical. She pushed that responsibility onto me. She knew I'd be bound by the rules of friendship to arrange the feast for her. Fudge looked down atop Vaught's head. You think she can become our next pet? Oi Fudge, you're outwardly calling him a pet. Thankfully, Vought didn't seem to hear or mind Fudge's words. Unlikely, he replied. Cherries would more likely want to eat the Iron Maiden rather than worship her. Michael wiped the sweat off his forehead after hearing that. A draconian who'll be immune to Fudge's brainwashing. Forgive me, Prophet, Chosen One. But I must leave you soon. I have just received word from my army that they have finished dealing with our pest. I must be there to clean up the mess. Pest? You mean the Falconry guards? Affirmative. That fast. It hadn't even been 10 minutes since the army was deployed, and already, They were able to wipe off a ranked 29th upper echelon company. What kind of army were they? He'd seen a glimpse of the draconians' terrifying power, but he still couldn't get his mind to wrap around the truth. They were simply too powerful. I bid you good luck in the feast, Vought said, as he bowed towards them and suddenly disappeared from their sight. Michael didn't know if he teleported or simply moved too fast for his senses. But either way, it was a power too far out of his current reach. TSK. The nerve of that guy, Fudge said disapprovingly. Not even giving me the time to invite him to our nation of Reborn. I'll teach him a lesson later. As much as he wanted Fudge to learn a certain thing called power hierarchy, he simply didn't have enough time. Now that they were in the feast, it was time for them to prepare. The sumptuous Draconian Feast Festival was a week-long event in which the conglomerates and upper echelons compete to see which of them sold the most amount of food-related products. Yes, food. This was a competition mainly tackling the food sector of the market. And according to Vought, this was simply because of Cherries and her insatiable hunger. So, even if the automobiles were selling like hotcakes in New Sparta, they were still not as valuable as actual hotcakes in this feast. Now, as to what kind of food he'd be presenting in this feast, there was no question about it. It had to be McTony's. Their sub-company was slowly becoming more and more established in the Lower Queens region, but they were still very far from being ubiquitous as the ultimate everyday food spot. Michael hoped that exposing them to the large market base of the feast and the New Sparta in general would boost their progress and expansion by a lot. Hopefully, they would become an actual fast food chain this feast. So, his first step in preparation was to visit his friend, Tony. Michael descended into his shadow, teleporting all the way back to their very first truck stop just a few kilometers away from Angora City. He found himself looking at a high-paced and zooming highway, with automobiles racing up and down from both sides of the horizon. And in the middle of the raceway, there was a veritable concrete jungle filled with a bustling life comparable to that of even cities and towns. The gas station, as expected, was experiencing a lot of traffic as automobiles lined up to have their cars refueled after their long trip through the Lower Queens region. But just beside the station was an even more busy collection of buildings, all with large glowing neon signs showing off the names of their companies and their specialties. Michael felt like he was back home in his previous life. The parking lot was packed with automobiles. And even from afar, he could see thousands, if not tens of thousands of people walking around the collection of buildings next to the gas station. It was a mall in the middle of nowhere. There were a few inns and hotels, all with amenities that let travelers experience the wonders, luxuries, and conveniences found back in the nation of Reborn. There were some general stores, some modern clothing stores, and even some appliance stores that sold refrigerators and air conditioners. The fact that the general design of this gas station mall was very friendly, with lots of beautiful walkways, overhanging gardens, and appropriate seat benches all over, made for some good tourist spots for people to stay and relax in. And perhaps the biggest and most prominent store in this mall was none other than the towering M sign on the skies. McTony's. Even now, he could see people here and there carrying a small cardboard box containing a half-eaten chicken burger while walking through the streets. The smell of that distinct, spicy taste of the McTony's chicken was wafting through the air, making even Michael hungry to eat some. Making his way through the busy walkways, he finally ended up on the first store of McTony's. The restaurant had experienced a lot of changes from the last time he'd been there. Not only was it at least 10 times bigger, but it was also more polished than before. The designs on the glass panels on the entrance were decorated with the theme of McTony's. The walls were pasted with pictures of happy families eating their famous chicken. And even the tables and chairs got a massive upgrade. It was all red, the colors of the chicken. Eventually, he made his way to the counter, where a cashier was patiently taking the order of a father and daughter combo, discussing what they wanted to eat, based on the menu above the kitchen counter. My daughter would like the Reborn meal combo, the dad said. I want the Miss Shiina figurine. The cashier took their order with a smile, before putting her attention on Michael. Her eyes widened. Lord Michael. She was one of the very first helpers Michael hired to help Tony. It was great to see her still here. Is Tony inside? She shook her head. No, sir. But Remy's inside cooking if you want to talk to him. Chapter 1085 Remy the Cook. Chapter 1085 Remy the Cook. Michael walked over to the kitchen side. He opened the door, immediately having the sumptuous scent of McTony's fried chickens wafting over his nose. The whole kitchen was hot, with steam billowing up from the numerous pots being burned with fiery flames. The cooks were so busy preparing their food that Michael's intrusion onto their working space was completely ignored. They didn't even know he entered. He scanned the room, finding Remy nowhere near the kitchen. After using his supreme talent, he was able to sense a light mana signature over onto the next room, which was what seemed to be the place where they stored their kitchen ingredients. He opened the walk-in pantry, seeing a teenaged boy hunched over wok with a serious expression on his face. Michael almost didn't recognize him. Remy? He asked out loud. After a few seconds, the boy finally looked up to see Michael at the entrance. Immediately, his eyes lit up. Bro Mike. Remy greeted him. Remy was Tony's only son. A scrawny boy who used to be so small that his father relegated him to simply preparing the raw chicken before they cooked it. But now, it looked like he could handle his own wok without problem. The last time Michael saw him, the boy wasn't even taller than a normal chair. But now, they were practically seeing eye to eye. Sure, they only had a few years of difference. But this huge growth spurt was anything but normal. You've certainly changed, Michael remarked. Hee hee. Remy awkwardly scratched his head. I wanted to be able to reach the kitchen as fast as I could. After seeing Tony wrecking himself over the work on McTony's, Remy himself must have felt pressured to some way contribute to his father's growing problem. Well, you both are doing a great job, Michael complimented them. It was true. Even without him micromanaging everything in their company, Tony and Remy were able to grow their restaurant to the point where it was the most famous franchise in the entire nation of Reborn. If one wanted to eat something good to celebrate a birthday, they ate McTony's. If one was sad after failing an exam, you pick yourself up with an order of their special spicy chicken. Even if there was no special occasion, it was extremely normal for people to simply use their automobile and travel to the nearest gas station just so that they could order from McTony's. 1033. If one wanted to eat something good to celebrate a birthday, they ate McTony's. If one was sad after failing an exam, you pick yourself up with an order of their special spicy chicken. Even if there was no special occasion, it was extremely normal for people to simply use their automobile and travel to the nearest gas station just so that they could order from McTony's. Thank you, bro Mike. We've really worked hard, Remy said, getting a little bit emotional. Remy then told him about the hardships and the current struggles they faced in their expansion. First of all, McTony's wasn't like the fast food restaurants from his previous life. They couldn't just simply freeze their chicken and deliver it thousands of miles away and still be fine after cooking it in hot oil. Because of the special ingredient that made McTony's fried chicken taste the way it was, it could only last a few days before the spice wore off. This meant that they had a lot of trouble setting up franchise restaurants all over the Lower Queens region. Of course, the simple solution would be that each restaurant would be creating their own chicken at their location. No need for chickens to be transferred. But as expected, this caused a lot of problems. The foremost problem was the lack of quality control. Before a chef could handle his own restaurant far away from the original McTony's location, they must have served alongside Tony for a significant amount of time. Then, and only then, could they handle their own franchise restaurant. But even if those chefs were trained by Tony himself, they still couldn't replicate his unique cooking output. It was a matter of talent. Not everyone could have that special touch with cooking. But Tony knew that they were still running a business. They couldn't stagger their progress just because his chicken recipe couldn't be replicated at a 100% capacity. So he made a compromise. In exchange for having lots of restaurants along the gas stations of the nation of Reborn, Tony promised that he would personally visit each restaurant no less than once a week in order to check their quality level. That was why he wasn't present today. Tony was currently traveling to the different franchise locations to ensure they sold good quality chickens. It's been stressing him out. When I told him I would be taking over the quality assessment, he refused, saying that I should spend most of my time in the kitchen to hone my skills. Tony knew that Remy was currently in his formative years. Any time he wasn't spending cooking was ruining his progress in the art. And if he did these quality checks, he'd be wasting at minimum 30 hours every week simply just traveling. So, Remy was left here to handle their main restaurant. All of our problems will be solved if I just figured out how to store our chickens for the long term, Remy said, looking down at the wok he'd been working on. Michael finally took a good long look at this room and saw numerous pinboards all over the walls. Papers containing chicken recipes littered these boards, each one connected by red string, as if Remy was trying to solve a chicken-related crime. You've been trying to find a new recipe, Michael realized. Remy nodded. My father thinks it's a useless endeavor, but I think I'm getting close. If I just figured out how to preserve dragon's whiskers better, father won't have to be away for so long. Michael truly wanted Remy to succeed. After all, if he did figure out the secret to preserving dragon's whiskers, the main ingredient that created the certain spice in the chicken, then they'd finally be able to create the fast food restaurant they'd be dreaming of. But alas, it seemed that it would take a long time for that to happen. Right at that moment, he felt a tapping from his shadow. Michael's heart pounded as he realized what was happening. He immediately summoned his shadow inventory on the ground, surprising Remy. Then, a few moments later, white flaming drops shot out of the tenebrous shadow and rotated in the air. These were none other than Godforge pieces. He once again felt them knocking to be let out of his inventory out of their own accord. This meant only one thing. They found someone worthy. And true enough, once the drops of Godforge pieces made a single lap around the room, they finally stopped right above the clueless Remy. He looked up at the star-like objects in front of him with complete awe. They stared back at him. Then, Remy closed his eyes and welcomed the drops into his body. White, flaming drops rained down on the teen's chest, integrating into his heart within a few seconds. As soon as the Godforge pieces found a new home, Remy's body suddenly emanated a shockwave of power that displaced all the paper recipes stuck on the pinboards. They fluttered in the air, making a mess of everything in the room. A few seconds later, the shockwave lessened. Remy took a deep breath before finally opening his eyes. Unbeknownst to even himself, he had become a magnetic. Someone who could change the very rules of reality to his own accord. But for him, this new power remaining dormant in his heart wasn't important. It was the change in his mind that he was completely awed at. A new gleam shined in his eyes. He felt a completely new understanding of his reality. It felt like all the disparate things about cooking that his father taught him was finally coalescing into one solid idea. He knew at this moment that his skill at cooking was transcending multiple levels with each thought. And before he could even ask Michael what had happened to him, Remy immediately looked around the room, seeing his carefully placed recipe experiments strewn around the room. But he didn't seem all that upset about it. In fact, there was a growing smile on his face that he simply couldn't hide. He began digging through his recipes, trying to disinter that specific thing that his brain had caught on thanks to his new level of understanding. Until finally, he found the few pages he had been looking for. And after carefully tearing them into pieces, he chose what he wanted and pinned them onto the now cleared pinboard. What remained was a collage-like collection of instructions for an entirely new recipe that looked unintelligible and random in Michael's eyes. I got it, Remy said, exasperated. I finally found it. The teen slumped into the ground, his knees feeling weak from the discovery. After all this time, all that hard work, all that sacrifices, those burned hands, everything was worth it. He finally found a recipe to preserve McTony's chicken. Chapter 1086 New Recipe. Chapter 1086 New Recipe. The teenaged boy with curly brown hair began rummaging through the pantry. He went through the different kinds of spices, sauces, and herbs in their collection, sniffing them to see which ingredient perfectly aligned with his ideas. Eventually, he found what he was looking for and he began his work. He sat down next to his wok with a new raw chicken. Then, without any kind of measuring instruments, Remy began to throw his chosen spices and herb blends into the wok, creating a new recipe that seeped deep into the chicken's skin. Michael watched all of this in complete silence. He didn't want to interrupt Remy's breakthrough. However, he did use his drone to see through Remy's new magnetic heart. Spools of ability power began to inch out of his chest, slowly weaving itself into reality and into the wok in front of him. As he continued to follow his new recipe, the ability power threads continued to grow. Not only that, but swirling golden lights began to gather above his head, slowly molding and mending to create a new image made entirely out of ability power. His diva was forming. Just a few seconds after becoming a magnetic, Remy was awakening his true power. Eventually, Remy breathed a sigh of relief. He took the newly coated chicken with both of his hands and looked over it with awe and amazement. Now, there was just one thing left for him to do. Add the dragon's whiskers. This was the most crucial part. He took the crushed red powder in their vault and began seasoning the chicken. Remy hoped the chicken wouldn't explode. That's what happened with every other recipe he tried. Red, glittery powder cascaded into the chicken, adding that signature color onto the white coating. And a few seconds later, the glittery gleam was slowly infused onto the chicken skin, turning into a liquid consistency and texture. Remy held his breath. It worked, he said. It worked. It worked. This was an entirely new recipe of McTony's chicken that looked stable. Unable to hide his excitement, Remy burst out of the pantry and back into the kitchen. He scanned the room. Every single stove was occupied with a busy chef holding two woks in their hands. Please let me borrow this, he quickly said to another chef, almost making the guy curse. Hey! But after seeing the look on Remy's face and the red, gleaming chicken in his hands, the chef quickly understood what was happening. Did you figure it out? Remy didn't answer. Instead, he dropped the coated whole chicken onto the wok, immediately making the oil burst into applause. It was cooking. It was like a symphony of crackling fireworks, with each pop creating a myriad of delectable scents that surprised each of the chefs working in the kitchen. At this point, the commotion finally made them notice what was happening. And despite the hectic orders they had to fulfill, they stopped and looked over their junior chef. Michael was among those who were stuck into this viewing trance, unable to look away. But instead of the actual cooking, he was more interested in what was happening in the ability power spectrum. Remy's threads were subconsciously weaving itself onto the chicken, the work, and even the fire itself. He was taking control of every single parameter of the cooking process. Above Remy's head, the figure of a humanoid, Buddha-like character was slowly starting to become less and less vague. He was wearing a chef's outfit, with a tall white hat that looked pristine and godly. The man's stomach bulged healthily and gave off the presence of someone who loved food very much. And this diva seemed to love whatever Remy was cooking at this moment. Eventually, the chicken finally reached its optimal temperature. The skin looked perfectly crispy, with its red gleam making the chicken look like it was enveloped in a planet of ruby crystals. Everyone held their breaths. It was the moment of truth. Remy took the chicken out of the oil and let it rest onto a plate. He gulped, waiting for the chicken to settle. Then, he took a knife and cut into the chicken. The skin crackled as the knife carved through the chicken's thighs, separating its legs from its body. Then, they saw its white, juicy meat, perfectly contrasting the red and exotic skin. Just from one look, all the chefs knew that the chicken was perfectly made. One of the chefs struggled to find the words. But Michael knew. It was perfection. This chicken cannot be tainted, Remy said. It can be frozen, it can be burned, but it can never lose its original taste. At the moment of its creation, Remy felt a huge weight release from his shoulders. The obese diva above his head finally became realized, cementing his ascent into the first stage of the body formation realm. He had become a chef magnetic. Remy, realm, first stage body formation, ability power, immortalized cooking. Any food or substance that the user creates will have its characteristics never lose its efficacy, no matter how much time has passed. It will be invulnerable to any physical effects such as rotting, degradation, and breakdown. Michael was surprised to see such a powerful ability power. Anything Remy cooked can't be destroyed. It was immortalized, up until the moment someone consumed it, thereby preserving the integrity of his original intention with the food. If Michael's interpretation was correct, then this was perhaps the most overpowered ability he had seen from a non-combat magnetic. With Remy taking control of the McTony fried chicken production, they'd finally be able to mass-produce their food all over the Lower Queens region. And the best part was that they wouldn't need refrigerators or reheaters. The chickens that Remy made would remain at the perfect crispiness, juiciness, and temperature that he intended. Finally, they could deliver McTony's to any part of the royal continent without worrying about the quality. A real fast food restaurant. You have gained 30 spirit. Chapter 1087 Magnetic Chef. Chapter 1087 Magnetic Chef. Michael's eyes widened as he saw ChatJK6 notification. 30 spirit. Did I get the spirit from Remy becoming a magnetic, or him discovering a new recipe? Either way, this did prove something that he'd only theorized before. He could gain spirit even if he wasn't the one who directly performed the action. He barely helped Remy achieve his true goal. The only thing he did was provide God-forged pieces, which helped the aspiring cook reach a conclusion he'd already been striving to reach even before he arrived. I have received enough information to make a hypothesis, ChatJK6 said. Remy creating a new recipe will directly progress the McTony's franchise. And since the restaurant was part of the Reborn company, its progress will also benefit the nation as a whole. In short, since Remy was a Rebornian, his accomplishments were also Michael's accomplishments. Therefore, he received spirits as reward from the world. This is good. I don't just have to focus on myself to earn spirits. I just have to focus on Reborn's progress. He gained a third of what he needed to advance to the second stage of the nascent spirit realm. Theoretically, 2 new recipes from Remy would allow Michael to get the prerequisite spirits to transcend his current level. Michael looked down at the core in his heart, which seemed to have grown far more active the last time he'd seen it. There were now numerous goldfish growing in the spherical pond of his heart. This tastes even more amazing, said one of the chefs as he took a piece of the new chicken. It's still the same, but it's more potent. The sensation it leaves behind does not fade as quickly as before. Good job, young chef. Everyone praised Remy for his new work. And it was at that moment that Michael felt another knocking on his shadow inventory. No way. He manifested a shadow on the ground, its tenebrous hole becoming a chasm in the kitchen. And in that darkness, numerous flaming white stars emerged. The 10 chefs in the kitchen looked up in wonder at this strange new phenomenon. But before they could even ask Michael what was happening, these flaming white drops crashed into their chests and integrated themselves into their hearts. All at once, 10 new shockwaves of ability power emanated out of the kitchen, making a visible earthquake tremor all over the restaurant grounds. Then, swirling lights appeared above their heads, coalescing and crashing into one another to form their own unique divas. 10 new non-combat magnetics. Michael was more than happy to welcome these new magnetics into their lineup. And it seemed he wasn't the only one. Not even 10 seconds later, a shadow appeared right next to him as a woman and an orc emerged out of the darkness. It was Castell, being teleported by an orcanine. Good morning, young master. Looks like we have new recruits. Wow, you're fast. The maid-turned-CEO smiled at Michael. Of course, young master. The ascension of these chefs will greatly help our company progress much faster than I originally planned. Castell turned to the new magnetic chefs who had no idea what being a magnetic even was. Please free up your schedules later this evening for a brief lecture on magnetics and ability powers. Surely you must all be confused. But worry not. We will be there to support you all the way through. Castell had a lot of plans for McTony's. And with 10 new magnetic chefs under their employ, they'd be able to much more control the progress of their sub-company than ever before. They'd especially be helpful in the upcoming draconian feast. They were the only food-related aspect of Reborn that could actually compete with the best of them. And with the new Eternal McTony's chicken coming, Michael would be able to implement the advantages of a fast food restaurant that this world had never seen before. While Michael and the Reborn company were peacefully preparing for the feast, the rest of the upper echelons and the conglomerates were in a massive pickle. Just a few days after TriStar's destruction and dissolution, another upper echelon company seemed to have suffered the same fate. The Falconry Guards, a company famed for their physical strength and military powers, were destroyed by an army of draconians, seemingly out of nowhere. Their camps were burned asunder, their bases were rampaged, and their garrisons turned to ashes. Now usually, this would have caused celebrations with the other upper echelons. More territory for them to fight over. However, the Falconry Guards were actually a sub-company of the Goldstone conglomerate. So, before the Falconry Guards were truly eviscerated from the face of the earth, the conglomerates stepped in and mediated between them and Vought. Nobody knew what happened during that discussion. But in the end, the Falconry Guards were no more. Their company was declared bankrupt. At least, officially. But what really happened was that the Goldstone Company reconstituted the resources of the Falconry Guards before declaring them bankrupt. That way, they didn't lose as much as if they truly got bankrupt. Thankfully, the infamous draconian Vought wanted nothing more than retribution for some grievances that the Falconry had done to him. So once the company was dissolved, he backed off. But even after that, people still wondered what caused one of the most dangerous draconians to attack an upper echelon. And after a thorough investigation, people found out the truth. Lord Vought has found himself a goddess, the Iron Maiden. I've never heard of that religion. How did Vought come to believe in that goddess? My sources tell me that the Iron Maiden believes that the starry explosion phenomenon came from that very goddess they worship. So, you're telling me that if I become a part of the Iron Maiden, I could make Lord Vought destroy a company for me? Many had those initial thoughts, but the gruesome fate of the Falconry Guards made them hesitate. They would be stupid to try and manipulate an ascendant. Chapter 1088 New Message. Chapter 1088 New Message. A few days later, New Sparta once again went into a state of hurried activity as people made their last-second preparations for the upcoming sumptuous draconian feast festival. Michael, Remy, and the rest of the McTony's chef were currently at their headquarters in New Sparta, getting their last things in before they eventually set up their carts in the feast. The festival was going to take place in the open park located in the boundary quadrants between the draconians and the rest of the beastfolk. It was right next to the Colosseum, which was currently in use by some company who had arranged some spectacle for people to watch during the days. The whole open area was connected to the 4 thoroughways that walked all over New Sparta, so it was easy for people to go there whenever they wanted. The conglomerates, as expected, were given the best territories in the area. They were reserved at the very corners of open areas, where a lot of people would be going in and out of, giving them a lot of opportunity to show their products to the people. Next were the upper echelons. He heard that there were a lot of disagreements and conflicts about who deserved the better spot in the feast, which thankfully the Reborn company wasn't a part of. After all, since they were only added at the very last spot on the festival, they were reserved at the very center of the area. In normal circumstances, this would have been the ideal area. But with the way that the stalls and buildings were constructed, the Reborn company would be closed off to the actual roads and pathways itself. Meaning, if someone wanted to visit their stall, then they would have to squeeze themselves through a very tight pathway or either walk through another company's restaurant and go to their back door just to enter their restaurant. In short, their company was very inaccessible. And in a competition that hanged on the amount of sales one amassed throughout a given period, being inaccessible was basically a death sentence. They really put us in the worst situation, huh? Said Shiina. This will not be ideal, Castell agreed. Our expected sales will be cut by at least 50%. All in all, the mood in the meeting room was dour. They were very proud of their product. They knew from experience that it only took one bite for people to get addicted to the spicy McTony's chicken. But that wouldn't matter if their target audience never even knew they existed. Of course, there were a lot of possible solutions to overcome this problem. For example, advertising. If they gave away some posters and some flyers, then they could attract a few customers even if their restaurant wasn't visible. There was also an advertisement through word of mouth. McTony's was already quite popular in the Lower Queens region. So, surely they would visit their stall during the feast at least once or twice. While Shiina, Castell, and Yuna were busy brainstorming an idea, Michael suddenly felt a buzzing in his pockets. He picked up his phone and saw a notification. Message from an unknown number. Good morning. Can we talk? Michael's eyebrows raised as he saw this new notification. A message from an unknown number. He had no idea who this person was, given that he had saved everyone he knew on his phone. So, the only possibility was that someone else gave his phone number to someone Michael didn't know. Who is this? He typed back. And almost immediately he got a reply. Forgive my manners. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Rivet. Michael repeated that name. Rivet. But no matter how many times he tried to recall his brain, he couldn't put a face to the name. Even ChatJK6 confirmed to him that he had never met a Rivet before. There are a few recorded names starting with Rivet. But the most famous person with that name in this current era is someone from the Guild of Arcana. Rivet, the Mystic Master of Metal. A Mystic Master. Michael couldn't believe that someone of that stature even knew him, much less knew his number. Wait a minute. She has my number. She has a phone. He'd certainly remember selling a phone to a Mystic Master. Are you the Mystic Master? He texted back. Yup. Ha ha ha. Didn't think you'd recognize me, boy. But yeah, it's me. I got your number from Regina, she replied. Finally, it all made sense. The Duchess. Was Rivet the friend she said she was giving a phone to? He didn't think that friend would turn out to be a Mystic Master. Listen, I would like to talk with you about the wonders of this phone for days on end, but I need a little favor from you. Would you be willing to sell me a few phones to give to my students? Michael texted back. How many? A few thousand, she replied. I can do 3,000. Deal. Thanks, boy. I'll try and visit you in the near future. I'll be hanging around during the feast doing a few lectures here and there. Hope to see you there. Why would she need that many phones? Michael wondered. A few days before that interaction took place, Rivet returned to the Grand Library of the Guild of Arcana. After witnessing all the miracles and once-in-a-lifetime events in New Sparta, she found it fitting to visit the archives and write down her new findings. Demi-human magnetics. Even as she wrote it down on paper, it was still hard to believe. She even expected to receive a lot of flack from the other Mystic Masters for writing this down. But what she saw was the truth. There was no mistaking it. Then she made her report on automobiles. This one was a bit better. After all, she had brought one herself to study and report about. Once all the Mystic Masters return, she'll be making a presentation on the automobile to them, which she hoped would go well. Mages were one prideful pack. Even though automobiles would prove to be the more efficient form of transportation, she bet that most mages would still reject its use and go with the old-fashioned method of traveling. Flying. Of course, that was hard to maintain since no one had unlimited mana, but that was a topic for another time. Anyway, hopefully that would change once she presented her findings to the panel, along with all the knowledge she found in New Sparta. Then, she took out her phone from her pockets. Regina gave this to her and she'd been using it to communicate back with her from time to time. And the more she used it, the more she was amazed. The phone itself was beyond even her own understanding. Then, there was the matter of the connection. Upon a cursory inspection, she was able to deduce that whatever was being used to connect these phones must be a cosmically powerful item. One that was greater than even anything the ancient humans had come up with. Just then, she heard a buzz. She got a notification. Message from Regina. Vought destroyed the Falconry guards. Master. Master. Rivet shushed them. We're in the Grand Library. Her students lowered their voices but not their urgency. We heard news of a great upheaval. Someone attacked the Falconry guards. Rivet looked at her students and nodded. I know. It's the draconian Vought. Her students looked at each other, flabbergasted. How did she know? They just heard about this news literally a few seconds ago. They even had a wizard use a laborious letter teleportation spell to give them that message. Master, how did you know? How did you find out about this before us? Isn't this Grand Library supposed to block any kind of magic going in or out of this place? Rivet didn't seem surprised. Instead, she looked down at the phone in her hands, a glimmer flashing through her eyes. It's because of this, she said to them. Her students looked at the metal brick in her hands, confused. They didn't sense any special type of magic embedded into the phone. What is that, Master? The Mystic Master smiled. This is a phone. And as she described its uses, her students immediately shook their heads in disbelief. Huh? There's no way, Master? Almost instantaneous delivery of messages? There must be some kind of magic that's allowing that. Rivet tossed them the phone. Feel free to correct me. I've looked at that thing for weeks now, And aside from its source of energy, everything it is using is purely physical. Her students immediately began to study the phone. Magic circles appeared in front of their eyes as they tried every kind of magic filter possible. And after a few days of careful studying, they were able to conclude the same thing Rivet concluded. This phone was a revelation. Master, since it can send messages, it means that there are other phones. Can we have one too? Chapter 1089 copyrighted. Chapter 1089 copyrighted. Eventually, the day of the festival finally came. And just in time, Tony finally came back from his weekly restaurant inspection. I'm back, sorry. I was too occupied with a certain customer. Just as Tony said those words, he opened the door to the kitchen and saw all of his kitchen staff possessed by some kind of figure above their heads. Chickens floated in the air, moving from one station to another without the help of any magic circles. It was automatically getting defeathered, battered, and cooked without any of the chefs looking over it with much thought. Not only that, but he was alarmed to see freshly cooked fried chicken just sitting on the counter. Why aren't the chickens in the heater? You'll spoil our products. Remy finally approached his father. And somehow, even though only a few days had passed, Tony felt like his son had grown a few feet. Not only that, but there was a sense of confidence and maturity in his boy that he hadn't seen before. It felt like he had finally become a veritable chef all on his own while he was away. Dad! Remy began telling his father everything that had happened while he was away, including Michael's visit and his bequeathal of the Godforge pieces. A magnetic. Something that is only thought to be in the legends. My son is a magnetic. Tony was overcome with emotion. Turns out he didn't have to worry about his son after all. He had already become a mighty young man without his help. Don't worry, father. Once we do well in the festival, we'll be able to earn enough merits to purchase Godforge pieces from the system shop. I'm sure you'll become a magnetic too. Remy began to gush to his father about the kinds of items they could purchase within the shop, as well as the various missions they had to perform to earn the currency to purchase those items. It all went over Tony's head, as he couldn't quite visualize it as well as his son. You don't have to earn merits for that. Michael ascended from a shadow on the corner, surprising Tony. Then, another shadow appeared right in front of Tony. A few flaming drops of Godforge shot up into the air, before circling towards Tony's heart. After a subtle shockwave, Tony began to manifest his diva. Swirling lights coalesced into the humanoid figure. One with curly red hair, pasty white skin, and a red sphere as a nose. Hey, wait a minute. I know I copied the franchise from that restaurant, but why is Tony's diva the exact copy of their mascot too? Michael was flabbergasted to see a certain clown appear above Tony's head. Thankfully, the diva was still a little bit vague and incomplete, owing to Tony's low cultivation. Otherwise, he would have been worried about an incoming lawsuit. After helping Tony get his bearings after this huge change in his body, they figured out that his talent was a little bit similar to Castell's ability power. That clown diva represented the entirety of the McTony's company, meaning that Tony had a new sixth sense related to his restaurant. This is amazing, Tony muttered as he closed his eyes. I can feel every single chicken being produced in our restaurants. This was actually very appropriate to what he had been doing before. Now, he didn't have to travel to all their franchise locations to check the quality of their products. He just had to focus on them. Of course, since he was just in the first stage of the body formation realm, he could only form a vague connection to the restaurants. But Michael had no doubts that Tony would be able to feel the temperature of even a single crumb in a McTony's chicken once his cultivation increased more. Oh, the festival. Tony remembered. Michael patted Remy's shoulder. Don't worry. Your son already prepared everything in our stall. Setting up was quite easy. Everyone was limited to building their stalls using wooden materials. It was even specifically stated in the rules that no one could use concrete or other materials. A targeted rule, of course. But it doesn't matter. Everyone had to play by the same rules. No obstructing walls, only a big tent that protected from the sun and rain. This was actually better for them, since at least their restaurant won't be boxed by tall walls around them. It will still be hard to access, but at least they'll be visible. They had the tables set up, the counters, and the kitchen area. For the entirety of the festival, every magnetic chef would be working in the restaurant. They needed all hands on deck. My apologies, said Tony. I should have been the one preparing all of this. Michael waved off his worries. You had other responsibilities. We understand. You didn't have too much trouble there, right? Tony sighed. The exact opposite, boss Michael. All the restaurants were working in good order, except for the Angora City franchise. What happened there? Faulty stoves? No. A customer had bought out every single fried chicken, leaving nothing for the other customers. Their fried chicken was good, but not that good. What kind of person would order tens of thousands of chicken by themselves? And they weren't satisfied with that either. They wanted to reserve the whole restaurant for a whole week. Tony complained. It wasn't about the money at that point. It was about reputation. They would basically be closed to the public for an entire week, meaning there would be a lot of bad sentiment about them. Or worse, they would get forgotten by the public. Thankfully, I was able to talk them out of it. I personally cooked 10,000 chickens for her to take away. I warned her that it would only last for a few days, but she didn't care. She just laughed. That wasn't even enough to satiate her for a whole day, she said. Chapter 10 91st Day of Feast. Chapter 10 91st Day of Feast. As much of a trouble that was, it was also very promising. If that same person ordered that much chicken during the festival, then they'd be able to easily put them up in the rankings without much trouble. Hopefully, whoever she was, would come to the festival in the hopes of eating more of McTony's chicken. According to Tony, she gave neither a name nor an affiliation. She simply put her 10,000 fried chicken onto a wooden cart and began to pull them away into the horizon. A weirdo and a glutton, Michael concluded. Buying that much chicken, she could have definitely afforded a pocket dimension. Or an automobile, for that matter. She definitely saw them racing up and down the highway, if she stumbled into Angora City. Either way, he couldn't rely on a single customer to win this feast competition. Michael, Remy, and Tony all teleported inside their designated stall in the feast. And immediately, the incongruous smell of food assaulted their noses. Some smelled of fried chicken, some of braised beef porks, and some of sweet and tangy desserts. All around them, they saw an entire wave of crowds walking through the pathways. Some of them stopped by and looked at the various offerings that the stalls around them had, then paid tokens to purchase those items. In this feast, the currency used wasn't coins nor sand dollars. Everything could be bought through tokens. This was to make sure that everything was fair. After all, some of the conglomerates priced their food using sand dollars, while some only priced it using gold coins. And the point of this festival was to see which company could connect with the widest range of customers, not how much you could earn from your products. Let's start cooking, Tony said with determination. Seeing how fierce the competition was around them, he knew that they couldn't slack now or else they'd fall very much behind. Yes, chef, shouted the other cooks. Immediately, Remy and the 10 other cooks began to fire up the stoves and worked like clockwork to prepare the chickens. No one in the festival could stock up their products ahead of time. They had to make everything in the stall, which was why it was very important to have good cooks in your company. While they were busy, Michael opened up his senses and looked at their competition. And immediately, he sensed the presences of magnetics all around the festival. In their area alone, he saw more than 50 of them working various jobs. And they were in the presence of companies in the lower rankings of the upper echelons. Michael guessed that the conglomerates and the higher-ranked companies would have a lot more magnetic staff working in their stalls. And unsurprisingly, most of them were non-combat magnetics. Using one of his mini-drones watching from the skies, he watched as one magnetic from their neighboring stall from the northern side used his ability. Hello, would you like to try our newest pastry? It's delightful. Ability power threads snaked out of his heart and eventually warped itself around multiple people walking by. Immediately, those affected people stopped in their tracks and turned to the magnetic, their eyes seemingly glued and stuck on the products he was presenting. An allure-type ability power, that wasn't the only example. Almost every company in their vicinity employed an allure-type magnetic to rope customers into their stalls. It was at this point where Michael realized the kind of competition he was facing. They were using less than ethical ways to lure in customers. The upper echelons weren't above manipulating the public in order to get more sales. Our first batch of fried chicken has been cooked, Tony proudly said as he wiped sweat off his forehead. Let's serve our first customers. His words trailed off as he realized something. They had no customers. Their stall, which only consisted of about 20 wooden tables and chairs, was completely empty. In fact, nobody even seemed to know that they were there at all. The crowd moved and rotated around the stalls and companies surrounding them. But none of them went through the cracks and discovered their restaurant. And the reason for that was simple. All the customers were being roped by their opposing stalls. Nobody had the chance to discover their stalls. Some of them were about to, but the allure-type magnetics from their opponents immediately stole their attention. Even the unique, spicy aroma of McTony's fried chicken was being completely drowned out by the other scents in the area. In short, they were completely closed off. Just then, the door to their tent slid open as a familiar face entered their restaurant. It was Alamia, one of the attendants Castell had deployed to try and gather some customers. I'm deeply sorry, she said, bowing to them on the ground. I was not able to gather any customers. Michael consoled her. It wasn't her fault. They were just completely outclassed at the moment, which he expected. This was the expected outcome in competing against upper echelons and conglomerate companies. Boss, what are we going to do? Michael stayed calm. We're going to do what we've always done. Tony, Remy, keep on cooking the chickens. Then he turned to the Lamia. Tell the other attendants to keep on trying their best to get customers. She wasn't the only one deployed to this mission. There were about 20 of them in total, all with talents in public speaking. Tell Castell to send our musicians too, he said. I want as many of our Rebornians out there in the feast. Even the artistic ones. I want all jobs and talents to be there. But sir, we won't be able to raise our voice against those magnetics, the Lamia said to him. She didn't want to disappoint him any longer. He smiled at her. I know. I wasn't expecting us to do well on the first day. I only want this to be a learning experience. He looked down at his feet, a shadow forming below. He could feel them knocking from the depths. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.